All right. Thanks everybody for tuning on in and joining us today on Brewery Software, how to make the most of your tech to sell more beer. My name is Aaron Gore, and I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Fifth Ingredient, Advanced Cicerone, and Vice President of the American Craft Beer Hall of Fame. And I'm very fortunate today to be joined by Adam Howe, Solutions Engineer and longtime industry veteran for GoTab Point of Sale. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm always impressed to be able to do one of these things with somebody who's gone all the way to advanced Cicerone. I did stop at certified Cicerone. I always use that as a feather in my cap, but glad to be in part of this with somebody who's gone the next step above. Yeah, a lot of time in the industry myself since about 2008, working in breweries, brew pubs, mostly on the brew pub side of things, pouring beer, managing staff in different brands from the West Coast to Midwest. Excited to talk about pretty much everything that we have on the docket.
Oh no, absolutely fantastic, and you know the advanced Cicerone thing. It was a really handy excuse to turn drinking a whole lot of beer into something admirable instead of something that I need to see my doctor about. But today we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. But before we dive on into the conversation, I do want to kind of set the stage a little bit. And I don't think I'm saying anything controversial when I say that the industry today is not the same as even the industry a couple of years ago, much less when you and I got into it originally. And things have gotten a lot more competitive than they've ever been. We're up to in excess of 9,500 breweries across the U.S. right now. With even while craft beer itself is declining a bit, and that means that more than ever, the challenges that we're facing, these aren't quality problems. And that's not to say that quality is important. At Beer 30, we have several modules and features that are entirely built around quality control, built around sensory, built around fermentation testing. Good beer is the cost of entry, though. That's not
Right.
necessarily your differentiator. The
Mhm.
challenges that we're facing these days more than ever are business challenges first and foremost. And that means that more than ever, it's important to not just sell more beer, not just save some money, but also reinvest in some of the things that are equipping you with the information and equipping you with the functionality to be able to respond to some of those business challenges. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about data. And data is a big ambiguous word. It can be a big scary word for people who have not done much playing in the data space themselves. But obviously, GoTab, a point of sale company, this is something that you guys do a lot of on the taproom side. So, Adam, tell me a little bit about for y'all and your experience working with hundreds of breweries across the world. What does data really mean? Break it down into something that's actually a little more tangible.
Yeah, I mean, data is a four-letter word, right? Sometimes it's a little scarier than it has to be. Data is only as good as the people collecting it, the software you're using to collect it, and then the people that are analyzing it. Right? So if you're not actually collecting data, then maybe it's not important to you. Then you can't just start looking at numbers not knowing where the source came from. Because data has to be clean for it to be useful, or powerful in that manner. For me, data, especially on the food and beverage side, basically it drills down to who, what, where, and when. Who's buying stuff, what they're buying, what they're drinking, how much of it they're drinking, et cetera, et cetera. When they are actually making those purchases, whether it's by the hour, by the day, by the time of year, and seeing those trends kind of outline themselves together, and then where that's coming from. Is it coming from on tap? Is it coming from, beer walking out the door in packaged product, kegs? Is it being sold at other bars and restaurants? Is it being sold at grocery stores? Where you're actually seeing that data come from matters a lot more because those trends are going to be a lot different coming from off premise than they are going to be from on premise. And then within the brew pub itself, knowing where these orders are coming from, are your pilsners selling a lot better on the patio than your stouts in the middle of summer? Yeah, so obviously all those things come into play, and then, I picked the low-hanging fruit there, obviously, but
I don't
um,
know. I've got a couple of friends who will drink imperial stouts when it's 120 degrees here in the Carolinas, so they
eh,
do exist. But
I most of my young adult life was spent in New England, specifically in Boston, and you're gonna drink iced coffee in the middle of December as often as you are going to drink it in the middle of July. So yes, there are outliers, and the data, where that data is coming from, again, that matters a lot, as far as where these things are coming from, and knowing how to take in that data, trusting the data, and then knowing how to spit it back out to make conscious decisions on what to do next. That's the biggest part at the end.
Absolutely. And you know, when we're talking about data, like I said, it can feel ambiguous, it can feel over large, but what we're really talking about is information that you're getting from tools. It's information is really the key thing. It's a source of truth to let you make better decisions. But in the context of a brewery, we're really talking about two main tools that you're going to be getting the majority of your data from. Because to your point, this is a lot larger than any one area of your business. This is about an ecosystem, and you really need to be able to understand what's happening throughout it to get a good full grasp of your business. And in that brewery space, we're really talking about point of sale systems, or we're talking about brewery management software. And whether you're using GoTab and Beer30, whether you're using some other software or even just spreadsheets, or I don't know, an old style cash register that no one's used since 1911. The important thing is the more information that you're able to have, the better you're able to respond to a market that's changing almost on the daily. So, uh, tap rooms in particular, though, you know, why is the tap room so important, and why a GoTab as a company that does work with non-breweries as well, even though there is so much of your business and so much of your origins caught
Sure.
up in the beer industry. So many people on your team do come from the beer industry. Can you speak a little to the importance of the tap room within the modern beer market?
I mean, this isn't modern. I mean, for me, the opinion of the tap room and its importance to the brewery as a brand has always been front and center, for every brew pub I've ever worked at. Never mind all the ones that we partner with here with GoTab. And it is the one location that you have absolutely complete control over what happens with the experience revolving around your beer. You control the temperature in which it's poured. You control the size in which it's poured. The pacing. You control every aspect of the experience. Whereas if I go out to a bar and pour your beer at my watering hole down the street, you don't have any control beyond the fact that you sold them the beer and they told you they were going to put it on tap and they were going to sell it in the way
Well,
that you asked them to.
and Adam, as we know, every beer and bottle shop across the country definitely cleans their lines every two
Oh,
weeks as they're supposed
oh,
to.
if
Everything
not
is
more
stored
often.
cold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. We know this to be true.
Yeah.
So it makes it the data that you're getting from that tap room, from your own tap room, is the one that has the least amount of variance, the most control you have not only over the experience but over the data that's actually coming in as well. It's the most impactful to the brand, in my opinion. I used to always teach my staff at all my different brew pubs is like we're going to remember like the experience that a guest has coming into the tap room is the one they're going to associate with the brand when they go out and decide what six pack to pull off the shelf at the grocery store, what beer to pour at the watering hole, when you're sitting at another bar. So you have that much more control over the memories, the experience that they are associating with your brand in your four walls.
Well, and that's an excellent point that your tap room is where you have the most powerful levers. If you're looking to experiment, if you're looking to really understand what customers are looking for and why, and you're able to really tailor that experience for them. But even beyond that, let's put some numbers around that. You know, studies have shown that for in 2024, uh, for 84% of breweries, the number one source of revenue for the entire brewery was their tap room. If we're talking margin, it's actually significantly higher than that.
Much,
So what
yes.
we're talking about here isn't just your tap room. You know, at the end of the day, really what we've become is a hospitality industry with a beer problem. That's really what we're doing here. And that means that the number one profit driver, the engine of your entire business, that's going to be that tap room. So getting things right in there is absolutely critical, because that is what's keeping a roof over your head, and that's what's keeping the lights on at any given time. And that really means that we need to be responsive of that, because at the end of the day, yes, you may have other bars you distribute to. Yes, you may have other customers. But for the majority of the people watching this, if not all of them, your tap room is going to be your number one customer. So understanding that customer, just like understanding the drinker on the other side, just like understanding the retail accounts, the wholesalers, everyone you sell beer to outside of your four walls, that is the most powerful lever that you have to make your business successful. And the more that you can understand what is happening there, the more you're able to actually influence it. But let's talk about the tap room. And I do want to kind of focus there for a second because on the point of sale side, that is the core, that is the cockpit of your tap room, of your entire hospitality business. So speak a little to some of the info, some of the KPIs, some of the key performance indicators that are really valuable to track there. Because I know for a lot of us, we look at sales, we look at, yeah, well, I'm selling this beer and that beer, and well, that's nice to have. And no, I can't sell any brown ale because who the hell can these days? Tell me a little about what's really important to track and why in your tap room.
Yeah, I mean, in the tap room, it really comes down to those four categories that I talked about earlier. It's the who, what, where, and when. Like I always like to advise people to like make sure that you are tracking your sales based on where those sales are actually coming in from. Are they coming in from the bar? Are they coming in from your dining space? Are they coming in from your patio? Are they coming in through private events? And like yeah, it's great to know what your total sales are for the day and your total income and revenue. But when you really break it down, finding out how much each seat in your tap room is worth. Not every seat is worth the same amount. So building out, a brewery a couple years ago, like that was exactly how we measured like what kind of space we were going to build out. How big can the kitchen be without taking away from each seat? Each seat was worth X amount of dollars with based on our pro forma. But we also knew that, hey, the fire pit area is going to be way more popular than this other table in the corner. So being able to track not only generalized sales, but also product sales per spot space in the tap room can go a long way to making those decisions in when you're deciding what beer to brew, what offerings to make in different areas of the space. And then knowing that it doesn't just come down to lunch and dinner or time of day, like being able to be really minute as far as how minute to break down the sales throughout the course of the day, every 30 minutes, every hour, and really seeing obviously the smaller the sample size you can create in that respect, you can see the trends actually flourish throughout the course of the day rather than just saying, my last couple Tuesdays have been kind of slow. But really, when you really break it down, you can see that, it's really not the Tuesday as a whole. We're not getting started until 5 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. And maybe you adjust your hours. Maybe that you can make that decision to make adjustments based on the data that you're selecting to be more efficient as well. So being able to run things based on time and by location on sales is going to make all the difference when you're making these decisions to make changes to, again, be more efficient and then obviously be more profitable.
Absolutely. And I love the example of the fire pit because that's a perfect example where understanding what's happening within that one small section of your facility also lets you predict a bit of what's going to happen in the future. Fire pits tend to be a lot more
Excuse
popular
me?
when the weather's good than they are when the weather's bad. And they're popular in cool weather, but not so popular in freezing weather. And they're popular when it's clear outside, not so much when it rains. That helps you understand what you're going to likely see as an impact on your bottom line based on whether or not that's really an optimal situation for that one area
Yeah,
of your
exactly.
business. The more you can really narrow down into specific, not just sections, as far as the actual physical layout of the space, but even specific customers, specific products is critical. And that means being able to cross slice as well. I know one of the things that GoTab and a couple of the other point of sales are able to do is really track down to the ounce. That's absolutely key. Being able to have an understanding that yes, I've sold this many 12-ounce pours, this many 16-ounce pours of this particular beer, but then being able to understand that that's all one category of product, all one beer. That goes an enormous way for giving you the power to understand what's actually making the biggest impact and not lose track in the meantime of just because you're selling a ton of singles of this particular beer and not much draft. These are all part of the same whole, and you're also able to understand the impact that format may have. But
The
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the other aspect too is knowing, how these orders and how the sales is actually being generated. Like everybody's clientele is different. Just like every tap room is built in a different way with different number of seats, number of fire pits or whatever. but the clientele that is coming in can not only range geographically, but also just who is your target audience? Does it go younger? Does it go older? Does it go more touristy? Is it more of a place that people are going out of their way to go to, or is it more of a local spot that's really driven toward the local economy? In knowing where the type of people that are coming in and where how they like to place orders, how like where they like to sit, like where like the type of environment that they like to do or like to present themselves is really important as well. And I say that of course coming from GoTab point of sale that really focuses on giving people as many options to place orders as possible, whether it's placing orders on their phone or placing orders from the bartender or placing orders from like a kiosk. Like there's a whole online ordering, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can do it, and not any one particular way is right for everybody, right? And so knowing what that flow is in your space allows you to lean into one direction or the other down the line as well. So being able to kind of see where those orders are coming from, and where their sales are being generated by your clientele, I think makes a big difference.
Well, the more info you have to match your service model to what your customers want goes a
Exactly.
long way because you will have people like me who hate ordering at the table with QR codes, mostly because I want to harass everybody else in line with me because I never quite shut up entirely. But it's also important to understand that there's a large contingent that do, and a lot of places that do QR ordering in addition to at the bar ordering, they do see a boost from that. And it's not like you and I are speaking from a lack of experience either. I mean, I know you've got a long history of running brewery tap rooms. At one point in time, I had 5 tap rooms in 2 states across 3 different brands. It's definitely an area where we've been able to fall down ourselves and see from experience that sometimes you have to trial this stuff, see
Right.
how it works, and the more granular you're able to get with the information, the more that removes you from just making anecdotal choices and decisions that you might not have all the information you need from. But it's not just about selling more beer. I mean, selling more beer is important, but at the end of the day, I mean, you got to understand what the beer actually costs. I mean, that is a huge one that I've seen a lot of breweries fall down on, not just in the tap room, but all the way back through the entire production process, sales to distribution. If you don't understand your costs, if you don't understand your cost of goods sold, it's very, very easy to lean on the wrong items because just because something might be bringing in the most technical dollars, you might be upside down or close to upside down on the actual beer itself when it comes to what's going in the bank. I mean, hazy IPAs. Raise your hand if you're making significant money off of a hazy IPA. No, because hops are expensive. They're ridiculously expensive, and people aren't going to spend $13 on a hazy IPA unless you're Trillium. Shout out to JC and Esther.
Yep.
But in general, we're most of us are having to make up some of that difference on other beers, and we really need to have an understanding that just because that top line number looks great, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's helping your business. So speak a little, Adam, to the importance of understanding costs, and just how critical it is to really understand the things that are making the biggest impact on your bottom line in terms of dollars, and not even just in percentage.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we talked about this last week, and the idea that percentages are not the end all be all.
You
And
don't put
being
percentages in the bank; you put
Yeah,
dollars.
exactly, as you put it. I mean, the thing that I always found the most useful, the most promising when we're training our staff, when we're doing menu changes, whether it be on the food side or on the draft side, on the beer side, is just knowing the thing that are actually going to sell. The more you can have something running, and I'll use food for example, like if you're targeting a 30% food cost across the board, you're doing it wrong because you have to be able to understand that you can sell something at 40% food costs, and as long as it's priced accordingly and it's going to sell, it will make you money. As you put it, money you put dollars in the bank and not percentages. But it also is strategic. Being able to put like a really high price item that you don't actually expect to sell a lot of does also bring it put a spotlight on everything else for your clientele that are coming in. So knowing that you have like again on the food side, you got this high end steak, maybe it's $40 on the steak, and maybe you sell two or three of them a week. It's going to be cost, not that great, but what it does is it actually puts a highlight on everything else in the menu just below that. All of a sudden, that $30 other dish doesn't look so bad as an option. Well, I'm not going for the $45 steak, but I'll throw down $30 for this other plate. And the same thing can be true with the beer that you're selling behind the bar as well. Like knowing that just because a keg of beer, just because you're hazy doesn't cost, it costs a lot more to brew, you can then be able to separate that, on the beer list as being a specialty beer, as being something that's, hard to get, however you want to like kind of map that out. But the other part that I always found the most productive for controlling costs wasn't even producing the actual product. It was the training of the staff in-house on portion sizes and efficiencies. We lost more percentage points on beer for new bartenders who didn't know how to pour beer properly, or draft lines that were not clean, or weren't, the glycol system went out, or
Please
whatever.
have a spill button.
Yeah.
If you do nothing else and get nothing else out of this, have a spill button and make sure you're tracking comps. There is nothing like watching a bunch of beer walk out the door just as going untracked. Like a good bartender gives away beer from time to time, and your staff will. You'll. It's better than a pizza party, giving your staff the occasional shifty. But like, please track it because you still need to understand where that's going. That's still key to
Yeah.
understanding your business.
We would encourage it. Like we'd tell my bartenders, yeah, you all have at least 5 beers you can give away on a shift. Just ring it in. All we're asking you to do is ring it in, and we'll comp it off. And then on the kitchen side, I mean, just portion sizes, like having efficiencies on that side when you're pouring dressing onto a salad, not just throwing a bunch of dressing on there, portioning that out, making sure your ladles are correct and things of that nature. Because again, food cost is going to be something that is extremely important to be tracking, especially since you're not your brew pub, your brewery. You care about the beer. A lot of our partners in GoTab, they'll actually outsource the kitchen altogether at their brewery. They'll just hire a third party to run the food, or they will hire somebody else who's like trying to make their way into the market. They're controlling everything. They're making all the profits. We're just helping to facilitate that process so that they don't have to think about it from the accounting side. But that part, the margins on the food side are so much smaller than on the beverage side, where you have a way less control. So wherever you can create control, that's where I've always found the most success on that side of things.
Yeah, pennies turn into pounds, and I love that you touching on the $35 steak earlier. Yeah, my biggest problem is actually that I'm willing to spend $25 on a charcuterie board, but when I have to spend four
Yes.
dollars on my daughter's Lunchables, I get upset about it. It's the same thing, absolutely the same thing. But as important as it is to understand what's happening in your tap room, that ecosystem doesn't stop there. We referenced the fact earlier that your tap room is, for most breweries, that's your number one customer, and if it's not number one, it's certainly the most disproportionately important way, even if it's just a marketing engine for a much larger brewery. That means that having an understanding of what's happening in your tap room is critical, even for predicting your own production. That's one of those areas that tends to go underappreciated is when we are brewing it. The days of if you brew it, they will come. Those don't exist anymore.
Right.
At the end of the day, the average dive bar these days has 2, 3, 5 craft beer options. If the goal of our industry was to make it easier to get good beer, then congrats, guys, we did it. We won. Now we have to give people a reason to stick around, but we also have to be a lot more mindful about what we're producing and not taking on the excess risk of just parking a bunch of inventory. So having an idea of the velocity of what's going through your tap room, what's selling, when, why, what are the biggest impactors on that, and what inventory is actually allocated to them. Anybody who's ever run routes in the beer industry can tell you there's nothing more frustrating than selling a ton of beer to a key account and then realizing that the tap room went and snatched all of it out of your cold box when you
Yeah.
weren't paying attention. And now you have to go back and explain that. So one of the key things for deciding what you're going to brew, when you're going to brew, and even upstream of that, what raw materials you're going to order, what hops you're going to need to contract, what grain you're going to need to have in house, what sort of adjuncts you're going to need to have in hand, packaging supplies. means that understanding what's happening in your tap room can have a huge impact, not just on what you're brewing, when you're brewing, what you're ordering, but even on your finished splits. How many kegs, what size kegs, how much packaged product. So the better you're able to get that insight into what's happening at that tap room level, the better you're able to plan. And that keeps you from having fall downs like a big event weekend without your number one selling IPA. Keeps you from having fall downs like, again, that big event weekend blowing out your number one IPA, and now you don't have anything to sell in the market all week and you're missing out some of your permanent taps. So the more that you're able to have fidelity between both sides of the organization, the better you're able to really make sure that what needs brewed is brewed. And what's being brewed is allocated to where it needs to go. And that's how you make the actual amount of inventory, the days on hand you need to keep on hand, as low as possible. We're in an industry that's really tough from a cash position. You're outlaying for raw materials. You got net 30 terms on that. It's 22 days before the beer's packed off. Now you got to hope to God that the wholesaler takes all of it. They won't. They're probably on 30 to 45-day terms with you. And before you know it, it's been 120 days before you've broken even on it. Anything you can do to keep your inventory as manageable and as lean as possible is only going to benefit the entire business. So having the back of house have the same information that they're able to work off of your brewer, your production team, your cellarman, your warehouse, your sales, and having them able to talk to and work with your front of house to make sure that everybody is able to eat at the table only benefits everybody.
You know what I always really liked, and you kind of alluded to this just now, but I always liked at the breweries that I worked at, especially the larger ones, where they treated the tap rooms like a customer rather than just an arm of the company, another part of the company. And the reason I like that is that it really put a spotlight on the brew pub as being your number one customer, and dictating a lot of what happens on the brewery side, on the production side. Well, you know what? Like, we want to be able to make this one-off beer or whatever because such and such tap room, whatever, wants it. We want to be able to do a contract brew with this other brand over down, on the other side of town. You know what? We really gotta focus on the fact that, 90% of our sales are going straight through our tap room. They're going to take precedent, and then you can make actual decisions based on that actual data, so you know exactly where that production is coming from. So I always liked that setup, in my experience, and I know not everybody does it that way, but just something to something always to consider how you
They
treat
they
your tap
should
room.
they should, Adam. But it does. It lets you really plot out the opportunity cost, and that's really what we're talking about here. Because if you treat your tap room like one more customer, just like any of your wholesalers are, what that really allows you to see is two things. The first, it lets you really have an understanding of what else that beer could be doing for you. You know it's going to sell for more and make you more money through the tap room than it will going out to wholesale, but by how much? What is the give take
Right.
there, and how do you properly prioritize throwing another batch of amber ale in for the tap room versus something that will actually sell in the market? Because I know tons of breweries who they sell a ton of amber ale over the bar. You try to put it in distribution, and they all try, it falls down immediately. So being able to compare that fairly is important. The other thing it allows you to do is see if there's anything in the tap room that might be impacting your service negatively. When you're sitting on seemingly infinite profit margins, it's very easy to lose sight of what could otherwise be poor hospitality, poor service, because you got a lot of fudge factor, a lot of wiggle room. When you know what percentage of the actual take you could have gotten from a wholesaler, it makes the tap room be a lot more honest and lets you see some of those things ahead of time so that you're able to remediate them. But part of the challenge there is making sure that you have accurate information on both sides of the equation. It's no secret that for a lot of folks, when it comes to their point of sale and it comes to their brewery management software, or even if they're on spreadsheets, there's a lot of entry there, a lot of data entry in the first place. Definitely a lot of double data entry if you're trying to move things from place to place. Make sure that everything is well accounted for. So one of the things that is absolutely critical is making sure that you have standard naming conventions. You have a way of making sure that everybody is speaking the same language and understands what they're looking at in each other's systems so that you don't get that inventory drift. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and you wind up in the proverbial apples to oranges circumstance that we all use as the most overused idiom ever. So, one of the things that has really started to become and gain a lot more traction within the industry has been direct integrations between brewery management software and point of sale. And I know that's something that GoTab's pursued. It's definitely been something that here at Beer 30 we put effort into. And, if your software is able to do that, it's definitely something worth exploring. If they're not, it might be worth exploring some of the options that are. But regardless, I'm going to go ahead and pull up just a little bit of footage from what our integration together looks like. Not to go ahead and dive into it specifically so much as just to really show what some of these look like as far as mapping products to each other and making sure that as you're depleting ounces in your point of sale and as you have accurate information within your point of sale, that you're also able to go ahead and watch that pull out of your source of truth on the back of house as well. Now that's key because it means that as your brewer is planning out the next couple of months of production, as your sales director is planning out what they're going to need to actually put into the market and be accountable for, you have the ability to know that you're not going to be deficient at your single largest customer. You're going to be able to rest assured that all of that is going to be in place. It's all going to be accurate from end to end. But Adam, speak a little to some of the importance of just data fidelity in general, even if it's just on one side of the equation, and the importance of making sure that your data has context, but also is standardized from end to end.
Yeah, especially in your in your larger spaces, your larger beer gardens, maybe you have multiple bars and like larger tap rooms in general. There can be a very easy trope to get into of, just creating different products of different versions of the same product within your point of sale, based on where it's being ordered from. All right, this is on tap at two different bars, so we'll just make a inside bar version of this IPA and an outside bar version of this IPA. And that's the easiest way, most common way I see data getting completely, just muddied up, where you're not able to actually run proper product mix reports, inventory reports, and what have you, based on the fact that you're literally counting you're counting the sales of the same product for two or four different times based on where it's being ordered from. And then naming conventions, that's one of the biggest when you just mentioned it. It's like just knowing how that information is being inputted into your point of sale, into your management, into any inventory management software that you're using, and keeping it as clean as possible. Are you a type of brewery that all of your beers are named by your brewery and then you have, the style, or does every beer have its own name and its own brand? And just being consistent across the board with that is going to not only allow your staff to be more comfortable placing orders quicker and then getting, generating more sales and just being more efficient, but also when running reports, just being able to see apples to apples or meatloaf to meatloaf. We'll try to change it up for you, Aaron. We don't
I
have to
am
go.
definitely not going to be using meatloaf to meatloaf going forward.
Hey, that's your choice. But like being able to actually see things in a comparable fashion rather than, also being able to, especially on the draft side, you touched on it. It's like being able to really track how many ounces you're pouring of this. Like, is this beer being poured at a taster level versus a pint level versus a shorty level, like in different capacities? And why is this beer being poured on
Well,
flights more often than other beers?
and if you have a beer that's selling getting a whole lot of samples or going into a lot of flights, but people aren't ordering whole pints, that's probably telling you something. If someone
Exactly.
has 4 ounces of it and they definitely don't want 12, that's probably a takeaway that you can have on your end. They're actually giving you information through that. And, it's the same as is true for tracking shrinkage. Like we said, having a spill bun is important, but I know there's 1,984 fluid ounces in a half barrel keg. There's 1,984 fluid ounces in a half barrel keg. But at the end of the day, if you're only selling 1,200 of them, that's going to tell you that something's happening, and it's either an entry thing, your team's just uh, not read up on needing to enter all that, needing to account for all that, or it might be something more insidious. And that's never what you want to happen, but it's still important to be able to get early warning signs on that, even if it's as simple as just coaching and remediation. Make sure they know there should be accounting for comps, knowing they should be accounting for spills. So a lot of power in being able to track that, and it also prevents drift on that inventory. it takes a lot of time to have to do manual stock takes. And those are important to do from time to time just to reconcile everything and make sure that everything's accurate. But the more points of entry that you have, the more possibility there is for either human error on the entry side or the depletion side. And that makes it much more likely that you're going to have gaps there. Even just trying to identify which source of truth is the truthiest can be a hazard from time to time. So the more you're able to have everything speaking to each other end to end, and the same goes for e-commerce. If you're doing any sort of online sales, having it so that you're able to share common inventory through Shopify, for example, with whatever you're using for inventory management. That's critical. If you're using WooCommerce, the same thing. It's important to make sure that everything is one cohesive ecosystem, because that means you're a lot less likely to have mistakes that do cost you real money and time and possibly the trust of customers if some of those are bad enough. Uh,
Yeah, and then also
Absolutely
being
critical.
able to communicate that inventory control back to your customers in real time is extremely important as well. Like it's the worst experience when you go to place an order, whether it's an online order, maybe you're buying a six pack to go in advance, or you're just at the bar and you're just trying to order, something, that ultimately is out of, and just adding that experience to your tap room experience of it just adds negativity to that. So being able to control that inventory and automate those, when something's 86, when a keg is kicked, and being able to communicate that fact in real time goes a long way as well for the experience.
Absolutely. And we talked about naming conventions a bit earlier, and as we're flipping through some of the assignments, some of the mapping that you can do in some of these integrations. One important thing to also track, however you track styles, a couple of things that are important to keep in mind, and I harp on this all the time. Customers are not BJCP judges. They are never going to be BJCP judges. It's perfectly fine to put BJP styles as part of the descriptor. But when you're tracking internally, one of the most important things to know isn't how much of your Pilsner and your Kolsch and your Blonde Ale are selling. That's important to know, but I can respect the differences between those three beautiful vaunted styles of beer. But at the end of the day, customers look at those all as the same freaking thing. It's beer flavored beer. You need to be able to group as well and have an idea of how that category is doing, because sometimes you might not even realize that you're cannibalizing your own sales, or alternatively that you have opportunities to continue expanding on this particular family of products that you might not even realize. So being able to really drill down into groups and really understand what's happening in the customer's mind is just as important as getting down to the granular atomic level of this beer versus that beer, this format versus that. But one of the things I do want to drill on as well, we're talking a bit about the end to end. We're talking about all this data, having all this data. We've mentioned a few of the ways to use it, but it's also critical to really have a true understanding of what that means. Square that circle and really dive into the insights portion of it. So Adam, do you have any suggestions for folks that are looking to really have a better understanding, not just of what the data says, but how to apply it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I touched it in the very beginning that data is only as good as the data that you're collecting and who's collecting it. And then the other half of that is obviously who's actually analyzing it. So having a better understanding of, what to actually do with the data. Are you just collecting data on, reviews? Are you collecting reviews from guests as far as whether they're on Google, Yelp, or if you're doing internal reviews as well, system? And I mean, we've done internal reviews at every place I've ever worked at, and 9 times out of 10 we don't do anything with it. I'm just like it just sits there. But actually putting your foot forward and actually doing something, I would have been a lot more productive with that data if I had the manpower, if I had the bandwidth to actually, put that to good use. So, taking the data and actually you allotting yourself some time to actually look into it and dive into it will allow you to make the decisions. Just having the data isn't good enough. Simple as that. So if you do have software that can automate the visualizations of said data to make it easier to really dive into and give you decisions or give you the opportunity to make decisions on that, that's going to go a long way as well. And that goes into having that single source of truth opportunity as well. Being able to know that I can go to one particular platform, knowing that all the data from different places are being collected into one spot, is going to make that is going to create the opportunity for that bandwidth that you don't have to be that much smaller. And knowing that you don't have to go searching for it in a lot of different places. There's always an opportunity, you know, if you have this kind of resource, it's like if your software has an API that you can access and you can pull that data into your own custom reporting, by all means, do it. Not everybody has that at their disposal or that knowledge at their disposal. But there's always that opportunity on the back end as well to you just know as long as your data is accessible and you know how to get to it and utilize it the best you can to make those decisions. Otherwise, you're just kind of cool. I got all these numbers, but I'm not doing anything with them. So what's the point? I so many places I've worked. We did inventory weekly. We did inventory like this is just inventory. That's just one piece of the data, right? But we would do inventory on a regular basis. But then okay, what are we doing with that information? Like it just felt like grunt work. And we weren't actually making decisions based on that. So it stopped doing, people would stop doing it or they'd stop doing it well. And then the data, even if we wanted to use it, now all of a sudden it was tainted. So my best advice is like make sure whoever's collecting whatever or whoever's collecting that data, they're doing it in a meticulous way. And then you're actually making all that hard work of collecting the data useful by actually, diving into it and making decisions based on it.
Absolutely. And I know so many people when they hear data, and we've been harping on that word to be certain, but what they're hearing is, they're thinking of, high, like college level, statistics and, linear regressions and p-values and all the other stuff that we all slept through during class. I get it. I completely understand. And it doesn't have to be like that because such a huge component of it is being able to turn it into something that's just easy to understand. And raw data can be a lot. It can be intimidating.
Sure.
I famously am absolutely horrific at Excel. I can barely create a 2 by 2 spreadsheet. And yet, having the tools that are able to help bridge some of those gaps for you are incredibly useful. I see actually Jeremy Carney from Central Coast Analytics is one of the people who's tuned in for this. And Jeremy, part of Apex Group, a group of consultants, this is all they do is create data visualization for the craft beverage industry. They do some fantastic stuff and really turn it into stuff that's actually usable. And I'm glad that actually Jeremy popped on and gives me a chance to shout him out because not only is he incredible, but we've also been working with him here at Beer 30 in particular on a command center. So a full tool that's designed to do exactly that. Take some of the information that you're already going to have floating out there and turn it into something that you can actually use in your business without having to get a degree in data science. I married a data analyst. I'm very, very lucky. She's able to do all that stuff for me. But if you're, someone who's just trying to run a brewery and wear 1,000 hats and book freaking yoga, like I get it. That's a challenge, and it's important to be able to benefit from having tools like this that can, bridge some of those gaps. So yeah, you're welcome, Jeremy. Thanks for being an awesome guy.
But yeah, having these visualizations is amazing, especially since having it all in one place, in consolidated. We talked. You showed the video earlier of our integration, being able to pull the data from one location to another and having it all kind of consolidated in a very friendly, very easy to digest form, makes all the difference.
Absolutely. And just even being able to drill down into some of these things and see the impact, not just on your individual products, impact on your sales from the different formats, pack types, even the brand groups, which you can set internally. You're going to want a tool like this. And if you're a master of Tableau and you're able to pull some of this yourself, then please do. But, the one thing I think is an underrated resource within this industry is time. You're all wearing far too many hats, and anything you can use, whether it's Beer 30 in our command center, whether it's something else or building something bespoke, the more you're able to actually leverage some of these tools and give you back time to get back to the beer and the people that got you into this in the first place, the beer and people that are the things that require that human touch, require you to actually put the time in on them, uh, that's really where your time is best spent. So it's not just about having the data. Data without context is like a dolphin without water. I forget what data scientist made that comment, but I absolutely love it because it's hilarious, and basically means nothing and means everything at the same time. It's about being able to turn that data into something that's actually going to make you better than not having it in the first place. And the more tools that you have, that's really the space that you want to put your time, you want to put your energy, because they're going to let you focus on the things that really keep the lights on and really keep your team employed and focused and moving forward.
Yeah, the being able to utilize the data to make those decisions. I'm basically going to echo a lot of the stuff you just said about allowing the humans to be humans. Like we don't need, as human beings, we can control the things that humans have to do rather than having to spend all that extra time and bandwidth on, going through spreadsheets, creating spreadsheets, learning how to make spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentation, whatever the case may be. Like being able to collect that, allow a software to collect the data and then present it in a way that makes it easier to digest and allow you to. I would always say this when talking to breweries that are considering using GoTab. GoTab does certain things that allows your bartenders to be bartenders and not cashiers. It allows your servers to actually provide service and not just be an order taker. And so it flows in the same way with this with data collection and data presentation. If you can have software that does those things for you rather than both on the collection side and the presentation side, it allows you to do what you need to be doing. It allows you to actually physically throw the hops into the kettle. Like it allows you to do the thing that you actually set out to do to begin with, and then share that with other human beings at the same time.
Yeah. Sharing beer across a bar with your customers is really that's the reason any of us do this in the first
That's
place.
the
So
goal. Yeah.
yeah, everything that gets you back to that is always a help. But using that tap room, we got a few minutes left. Adam, I'd really love to hear some of your suggestions for how to use some of this information, and not just the info itself, the data itself. Let's talk about applying it. Like, what are some of the things that you can use insights about your customers, insights about the beers that are selling the best? What can you do in the tap room in particular to actually utilize some of that information?
Yeah, I mean, I said this earlier, but like being able to track when things are being sold you can really start fine-tuning your hours of operation. You can, as broadly as that might sound, like knowing that, listen, I can get more stuff done if the tap room wasn't open on Monday. You can make that decision. It actually costs me more to keep the lights on for this day of the week, or just like these 3 hours on a Monday, we can be open just for like a couple hours, or being provided, making the conscious decision to provide a limited menu at certain times rather than your full menu, and knowing what those items would be that would be the most efficient and that will still sell. And so being, starting off with a broader sense and then diving into the data to make those decisions on what to cut, what not to cut, that's going to cut on the kitchen side. It cuts on how many prep cooks you're going to need, how much time they're going to be spending on any certain day or time of the day, to actually present that menu. And also from on the front of house side, being able to dictate what your staffing levels are supposed to be. If all of you're not selling any food on Monday, maybe you can run that whole thing with just one kitchen line, and even your staff can go down to like just the bartender. Like you can make these decisions based on the data that you're actually collecting and you're actually analyzing and looking at it. The other thing that I've always used data to manipulate is just what items in general I want to rotate through. Most of the tap rooms that I've ever worked at had a full kitchen. They were full restaurant style. So again, most of my talks that I bring back to food as well. But like we would rotate our menus at least quarterly, if not monthly. And you don't have to change the entire menu, right? You can take off one or two things. We used to always say you can make the most impact on your menu by changing one thing that touches the most plates. And the same thing can be true on the beverage side as well. It's seasonal with obviously with seasonal options and not eating into the different categories as you mentioned earlier, not having, five different yellow beers on versus one stout and then deciding to just add four stouts on for whatever reason.
If you are
Actually having a
using
reason.
15 different types of yeast in your brew house, reconsider.
And that's I just a whole video on this on the food side as well, like keeping your menu, and that's true on on the food side as well. The less ingredients you can keep in your kitchen, the more efficient that you can end up being, and obviously the less waste you're going to have as well. So seeing what those products are that are selling on a regular basis, and then adjusting your menu accordingly. I see that like my top 9 out of my top 10 products all use a certain protein. Okay, well, that's the protein everybody wants. That's the protein I'm going to buy in bulk. I'm going to save money in that respect as well. Not only for that's what people are buying, but if I know I'm going to go through it, I'm not going to waste it. I can buy more of it, and hopefully you get price breaks on that. Same thing obviously is true on the brewery side as well. So those are, and then the other thing that I always use the data to predict, it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with like those large events that you have, and knowing what you're going to do in those events, so you can dictate not only what your supply is going to be, but what the hours of that event are going to be, what promotions you're going to run around that, what promotions you're running that are working and that are not working, and being able to either replicate that in a new inventive way, but also being able to just replicate it in on a regular basis without it getting stale. So being able to see those trends based on the activity that's actually happening in your brewery rather than just what you're selling, that's where you can start manipulating what you're doing in your brewery to create a new experience. Because as you said before, unfortunately, it's not just about making the good beer. It's also about providing an experience that somebody's going to remember and then associate that with your brand as well.
Absolutely. And just anecdotally, even just being able to bring it back and make it a little more concrete, you can have something as simple as should you run live music on Thursdays?
Right.
If you're spending $350 on a band every Thursday, do you know if you're incrementally making $350 more than you would without the band? That data doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be something obtuse or arcane. It can be very, very simple. Just something as simple as being able to compare two different set of circumstances and seeing the difference between them. That can be incredibly powerful. And to go back to your comment earlier about the importance of time of day when you're open, even just knowing how to do some of your messaging. Spirits actually don't hit their peak in brewery taproom sales until after 11 p.m. But beer starts cratering after 11 p.m. So understanding if you're running a liquor program, the difference that those are going to have on your business at different time of day really helps you prepare your staff. Have your best cocktail staff on staff later and able to facilitate that. It lets you run promotions. It lets you have a real understanding of what your impact is most likely to be. So these don't have to be hard to manage. These don't have to be over the top. It's about finding small actionable things that let you really understand your business, because I really do believe that everybody watching this, you do know your business better than anybody else. But if you're not armed with complete information, it's very, very hard to turn that into actual actions. But
Yeah.
Adam, thank you so much for being on here with us. I really appreciate it. We will have a recorded version of this going up as well for anybody who wants to rewatch it or anybody who wasn't able to tune in live. Thank you to everybody who was able to pop on. And thank you again, Adam, everyone at GoTab, and anybody who's going to be at CBC. We'll see you there.
Yep. Be there. See you there.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.